The lead up to this one, and Michelle, Travis Kelce seems to be heating up at the right times, is something he does all the time. 15 total receptions over the last 2 games. He spoke to the media today. What did he have to say?
Laura, I can tell you that playoff Travis Kelce is definitely in the house, as we saw in that 49-yard catch and run against the Houston Texans. He just has this uncanny ability of coming up big in the biggest moments, in the biggest games. And one thing that certainly helps him, at least in terms of understanding coverages, is his experience in high school and college as a quarterback. And the quarterback he would have loved to be, well, I'll let him handle that.
Josh is who I used to dream about being like in the NFL. Big, athletic quarterback, big arm, being able to be a dual threat guy. I never had the arm talent that Josh had, so they kicked me over to tight end. And, his ability to do everything, obviously he's, you could tell he's really took the bull by the horns and really been their leader up front. And channeled that. Guys come in and out of the building, and he's the main piece in there making that thing go week in, week out. And I got so much respect for that guy.
Yeah, he might have dreamed of being a Josh Allen type quarterback in the NFL, but I would say that the move to tight end has worked out pretty well for him, especially as he closes in on another NFL record, this time on postseason touchdown receptions. Now, part of his secret, he told me, bringing the energy. He feeds off the energy, he said, off the younger guys in the locker room, guys like, say, an Isaiah Pacheco or an Xavier Worthy. So I thought that was really interesting perspective from the oldest guy on this offense, 35-year-old Travis Kelce, Laura, for whom age, for now, just a number.
Yeah, he keeps telling everybody he feels 22. I wonder why. All right, the playoffs bring out the best in Travis Kelce, okay? Over the last 5 seasons, he averages 2 more catches and 27 more receiving yards in the playoffs compared to the regular season. He also has 14 touchdowns in 14 playoff games in that span. With 2 more, he would tie Jerry Rice for the most receiving touchdowns in NFL playoff history. That was the history that Michelle was referencing. Now, as for this Bills defense, they got some bad news on the injury front this afternoon. Sean McDermott ruled out safety Taylor Rapp for the AFC Championship game. That, according to Arlena Getzenberg. Rapp's absence means rookie safety Cole Bishop is now in position to start versus the Chiefs. RC, what do you make of that news?
Well, I think the one thing is you love to have the chemistry and continuity at the safety position, and so much goes into that when you think of communication. And so now the communication will be different between DeMar Hamlin and Cole Bishop, especially when we see the way that Travis Kelce can ramp it up in the playoffs. And here's the thing, and I played at the age of 35. It wasn't that I couldn't get it going for 1 game or 2 games. It was just hard to get it going for 16.
Right.
And we've seen Travis Kelce in the last 2 weeks or last 2 years sort of figure that out. We know how important he is on third down. We know how important he is in the scramble drill. And so if you're the Buffalo Bills, you want to make sure, whether it's Matt Milano or Terrell Bernard, you're keeping him or keeping Patrick Mahomes in the pocket, because now with a young rookie that could be matching him in zone, you don't want him to get lost in the scramble drill and not have the ability to plaster like a veteran, like a Taylor Rapp may have.
I would take shots at this Buffalo secondary, specifically their safeties. We saw it against Denver. We saw it last week. Couple moments when they got out of position, maybe had some bad eyes, and you're able to throw the ball down the field at this group. And here's the thing. Kansas City has been really close at hitting some shots down the field. They just haven't made them. This is the game you got to go make them. Baltimore made them last week, and it was a huge reason why they had so much success moving up and down the field. This Kansas City offense, I've said for weeks, is close, and it's closer than people think. But you can't be close in this game. Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, you're going to have to make the shot and take advantage of the opportunity. I want to see how they use Xavier Worthy in this game. They used Worthy a little bit last week, Kansas City, almost like Buffalo has Ty Johnson a little bit, or Curtis Samuel. Him having an impact in the different ways is big, but they got to hit their shot down the field when it's there.
Yeah. 2 thoughts. Going back to last game, Patrick Mahomes had one of his highest play action usage of the regular season. Play action in this one. To Dan's point, hitting those shots downfield against those safeties, buying him some time. I think you do that a lot. The other thing is this, with regards to Travis Kelce, this is in contrast to the last game, where, as you guys remember, he had 8 catches. He was not a big part, you see there. I would align him tight to the formation much more than they did, because in aligning him out wide, the Bills were able to put Christian Benford on him. They were comfortable playing man coverage. Christian Benford, who's their best cornerback. Taron Johnson was on him in the slot. Those are matchups you like if you're the Buffalo Bills. But if you can get him lined tight to the formation, or maybe in the slot out of bunches, working the middle of the field, going up against those linebackers and safeties, you feel a lot better about that if you're the Kansas City Chiefs. So I would not split him out wide very often.
Yeah, one note, Benford was listed as questionable on the injury report today and didn't practice.
That's
RC,
huge.
That's a big deal.
It is, right. Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that
yeah.
for sure. Now, RC, when it comes to defending Travis Kelce, I say it that way because nobody really figures out how to do it in the playoffs. But what is the recipe here for the Bills to try to do it with the personnel they have?
You know what? I love that Mina already hit on some of the coverage guys they used on him last time. And Taron Johnson plays a ton against 12 personnel. And you can look at what they did with Isaiah Likely and also Mark Andrews last week. I think they should mix some of the coverage up against Travis Kelce, that even if Taron Johnson is on him, sometimes bumping him if you're going to drop into zone, or locking him and playing some 2-match, doing some things where you can play palms and now be reading Travis Kelce while you square up in the middle if he goes out. I think you have to mix up the looks against him, but also use different coverage guys. I believe it starts with Taron Johnson, but when you have Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano available, they can be on him too in some man situations. But if they major in zone, which we see from Sean McDermott's defense in the 2-high, I believe Travis Kelce will find his spots.
Yeah, I would treat it as a Where's Waldo situation defensively, or I would expect it. Offensively, we often have a Where's Waldo, where teams that have a chess piece defensively, where is that guy? Sometimes end man line of scrimmage, inside, off of a rotation. So we're always having our eyes on him. I think Buffalo defensively should deploy something like that. Where is he? Someone is constantly designated on either side of the ball to hit him at the line of scrimmage, to throw something that timing off, because then you take advantage of the interior with Caliendo or the opposite tackle with Jawan Taylor. If you can throw off that timing and get to Patrick, it minimizes as much as you can his big-time impact.
I know, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about the touchdown pass in the divisional round where Patrick was going to
Not
the
even
ground.
a route. Not even a real route.
What are you going to do? All right, we're just going to have hired Pete Carroll as their new head coach. Jeremy Fowler joining us with more. Jeremy, how did this come together?
Well, Laura, the Raiders narrowed their search after they lost out to Ben Johnson to the Bears. And I'm told Pete Carroll rose to the top because his in-person interview was really strong, to the point that they were worried about losing Carroll to another team potentially. Minority owner Tom Brady has always admired and embraced the way that Carroll could build a program and build a good defense. And so Steve Spagnuolo from Kansas City was in the mix here, but Carroll specifically sold this team on a vision for a team in transition. And look, I reached out to a few former Carroll lieutenants in Seattle. Both expect Carroll to be a great fit in Las Vegas, but they also both pointed out they would not be surprised if Carroll reached out to Russell Wilson, possibly trying to sign the free agent, make amends for what went wrong at the end of that Seattle era. One of them even pointed out that Carroll and Wilson began to rekindle their relationship about a year ago or so. Wilson's always been intrigued by wearing the black and silver, so could be a back pocket item for later.
That's really interesting. I didn't necessarily think about that when I first heard this news, but I'm sure there'll be a lot more time to see if that happens. Thanks to Jeremy. More from you later on in the show on the Commanders. Now, the Raiders will be the 4th franchise that Pete Carroll has been the head coach for, along with the Jets, Patriots, and Seahawks. He'll be the 6th coach in NFL history to be the head coach for 4 or more franchises, and just the 3rd in the Super Bowl era. Pete Carroll turned 74 years old in September. He'll surpass Romeo Crennel as the oldest head coach in NFL history. Mina, you watched Carroll for years as we welcome you onto the show. Mina Kimes, RC, and Dan Orlovsky here. You watched him every Sunday as a Seahawks fan, right? Is he a good fit in Vegas?
I think so. You know, as we've talked about these coaching hires, one thing I always say is, well, we don't know how he's going to be as a leader, as a CEO. Can he run the organization? We know that with Pete Carroll. I mean, the man has literally written books on leadership. He is a culture guy. He's a player's coach. So that's not a question mark. But I also think he addresses or satisfies some of the things that the Raiders in particular need. Number one, he has proven that he can build an environment and offense around a young quarterback. Even if they were to bring in Russell Wilson as a bridge, there's still going to be a young quarterback in the building either this year or at some point. And the other thing is fixing the pass defense. I mean, Pete Carroll is a genius when it comes to coaching DBs. We saw that in Seattle. Even when the defense struggled, he was still trying different things schematically. So I think his mind in terms of addressing that defense, which is sorely needed in Las Vegas, will also be very helpful.
I think what this shows to me is that the Raiders wanted a proven winner, and not only someone that can build an organization or build a culture, but someone that could change a culture. Also make the very difficult decisions. Remember, Matt Flynn was signed to the Seattle Seahawks when Russell Wilson was drafted in the 3rd round. And he went through that preseason and he saw leadership skills. He saw the talent in Russell Wilson that said, I'm going to forego the guaranteed money we've given Matt Flynn and go with the best player and the guy that gives us the best chance to win football games. It's going to take that sort of confidence. It's going to take that sort of integrity when it comes to decision making to build up a program that has bounced from coach to coach to coach in the last 4 or 5 years. It's about stability. It's about something that's proven. They don't want to be the potter that's taking the clay and molding it. They want to go to the nice place and buy the fine china, and that's what they did in Pete Carroll.
Yeah, I really like the move. I would say this. Well, who are the coordinators? And not only for the X's and O's, but for the future. I think teams in the NFL need to start handling their assistant coaches and coordinators like the Packers do quarterbacks, always having the next one ready. And Pete Carroll's 74. He's great. If you get 3 or 4 really good years out of him, that's awesome. You've reestablished a new identity. But you better have coordinators that are ready to step in that head coaching role so that continues and you don't have to try and restart. The second thing is immediately I was like, who's going to be your quarterback? The more I've thought about it, I don't think that's going to be a priority for them. Pete Carroll, to everyone's point, went a long way with the Seattle Seahawks to the Super Bowl with a quarterback in the 3rd round, but because they had a dominant football team. Tom Brady became the greatest quarterback of all time as his 6th-round pick because he had many dominant players around him. Near the end of his career in New England, those players started to decrease. He leaves New England after struggling at the end. Tom Brady can't play anymore, goes to Tampa, who had a loaded roster of talent around him, and won a Super Bowl. I think they will build the roster way before they go address the quarterback.
It's an interesting point. It does make you think, could they even grab one of these guys in the draft this year that would be a younger guy, Quinn Ewers even, something like that?
Yeah, I think they would entertain it, but I think that they are going to do everything they can to build the infrastructure so the quarterback is in many ways the last piece.
Mina, what did you think about the Russell Wilson suggestion that Jeremy made?
Yeah, as a bridge quarterback on a reasonable deal, I think it could make some sense. I still think that they need to pursue a young quarterback. Doesn't have to be in the 1st round, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's under consideration for the reasons that Jeremy outlined.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that and plenty of news, of course. But it is championship weekend in the NFL. We've got this covered for the action going Sunday at 3 Eastern. And Jeremy Fowler has been with the Commanders all week. He joins us now. Jeremy, Jaden Daniels spoke to the media earlier today. What did he have to say?
Daniel said it firmly, Laura. I let my play do the talking. That's why he has been loose all week. He has had an ear-to-ear smile every time we've seen him. He was hitting a 2-step dance in the indoor facility before practice. So this team clearly is loose and confident.
Everybody tries to write an underdog story, but for us, it's just we're just going out there and playing confident. Know we can compete against these guys, and that's a very good team. So there's nothing I take a little extra motivation. I'm already motivated to go into the game, regardless if it was week 2 or, the NFC Championship game. I mean, you really don't want to make a game too bigger than obviously what it is or where it can be. Obviously, it's a big game, but, you got to go out there and keep the same process, keep the same routine, and, trust your preparation.
Washington wrapped up a series of short practices today. Tomorrow they will hold a walkthrough, and then they will take a brisk 20 or so minute flight to Philadelphia. Head coach Dan Quinn has told his staffers this week, we are not about to play tight on Sunday.
Can't wait to see this game, Jeremy. Thanks so much for the latest on the Commanders from you. Jaden Daniels, by the way, looking to bring the Commanders their first 8-game win streak since 1991 when they started 11-0. Now, Jaden Daniels had a historic season on the road, which is important to note here as they'll go on the road. Out of 526 quarterbacks with at least 250 pass attempts on the road in a season, his completion percentage of 73.5% is the highest of that group. 2009 MVP Peyton Manning and 2018 Drew Brees ranked second and third for reference. Dan, how would you attack this Philly defense if you're Washington?
Were anyone else taken aback by watching Jaden do a spin in the middle of that drill during Jeremy's report?
What was that?
I've never seen anybody do that.
He's loose, as Jeremy told us.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about I do think you can have success against them with some motion runs. I think when you rewatch the Rams game as well, two things that stood out were, one, getting into a 3-by-0 formation, which Philadelphia absolutely has, and Washington absolutely has, and utilizing some play action pass. It felt like the 3-receiver side almost lifted a ton of coverage on Philadelphia's defense and allowed for some short throws, but then also just got the attention of some of those safeties. And this would be something, even in their no huddle, I think Washington is capable of. The second thing, you got to trap and or wham this defensive line, specifically those tackles. Carter, Williams, they love to penetrate in your run game. They're physical and very violent off the line of scrimmage. If you could trap them a couple times, make them play a little bit slower, I think that helps you in the run game if you're Washington.
Yeah, the Rams had some success taking advantage of that aggression. Then when they got to the second level, they were able to go after Oren Burks, who is the Eagles' backup linebacker. So I agree with that. Something that the Commanders did very well in Week 16 that I think that there's an opportunity to do again for big plays is just Jaden Daniels in empty in no huddle. And he's a bit of a cheat code in those scenarios because of the threat of him running or his ability to run. He went for 2 explosive runs against Philadelphia out of empty, including the 29-yarder on 4th and 11. It's such a problem for them, but it's also because he's able to throw deep quickly. And again, he hit 2 go balls, one of which caught the Eagles with 12 men on the field. This Eagles pass rush, particularly in the interior, is obviously very intimidating, particularly when you have a backup guard. So it's a little bit scary that he's back there by himself. But because he throws the ball so quickly, when he sees a matchup he likes, that is mitigated to some degree.
I love that, Mina. Think about what we saw this week or the last time these two teams played is we see Terry McLaurin get behind Quinyon Mitchell. And at that point, no one had really tested these Philadelphia Eagles corners on the outside. The De'Ami Brown catch down the right sideline on Darius Slay. And then the movement to Olamide Zaccheaus getting the football down the field. Think about DeMarcus Robinson last week, the big catch over Isaiah Rodgers, and also down the sideline, Puka Nacua. I think you can attack this defense down the deep part of the field if you take timely shots. Add that along with what Dan is saying about being able to run the football, get into the play action, move into empty. Cliff Kingsbury has done an amazing job of mixing things up, making things diverse, and taking shots when they present themselves, and that could be a huge piece of the way they create chunk plays if you're the Washington Commanders this weekend.
So totally love the empty. I would throw early on 3 or 4 perimeter screens out to whether Quinyon Mitchell or Isaiah Rodgers' side and just force those guys to take on contact and make a tackle in space. If I was Washington, one of the things I would be harping on consistently this week is this defense runs to the football, and they are going to punch at it out in space. So that ball security in those moments at all times, because I don't believe there's a defense in the league that runs all their 11 to the football and punches at it better than Philadelphia defensively right now. That's going to be huge.
Yeah, that's interesting when you think about the Philly defense. The other thing, RC, I'm curious your opinion. Can they find a way, Philly, to pressure Jaden Daniels without actually blitzing? Are there different things they can do with their scheme and with their players?
Yeah, you most definitely can. Now, the big thing is Vic doesn't normally use a spy, and now you have Nakobe Dean being replaced by Burks in the middle of that field. And so some of those simulated pressures, which Nakobe Dean had become a master at, those things have been taken out of what they do in the playbook, and they kind of tried to add Zach Bond. But when you look late on in that game, when Nolan Smith and also Jalen Carter on the same side, the way those two work in tandem in twist and fake twist were huge in getting to Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, I think it's less about a spy and more about, one, rush lane integrity with your rush, but also having one of those backers, just making sure they've got eyes on Daniel as part of like almost a delayed rush. The other thing I'll say is this. If I'm Vic Fangio, and I guarantee he is telling his defense, force him to the left, almost every single one of Jaden Daniels' scrambles goes to his right. So that has to be a coaching point for this defense.
Yeah, it's interesting. Jaden Daniels, by the way, 96 QBR versus the Eagles in Week 16. So
they went after him. I would not.
Up against. They'll change that some, I bet. All right, coming up.
Under that, and then finally, Travis Kelce, over 6.5 receptions. You heard us talk about playoff Kelce at the beginning of this show, but it goes beyond playoff Kelce. He has topped that number in 9 of his last 11 games. I would be surprised if Mahomes doesn't go to him often and early, as he likes to do.
I love it. All right, there's a parlay. The Chiefs, by the way, currently 1.5-point favorites at ESPN Bet. They are the home team. Now, all customers can get rewarded with a $5 bonus bet when you make a deposit of $25 or more at ESPN Bet Sportsbook. Head over to the app and use code HUDDLE to get started today. An action-packed day in coaching news as teams are filling their vacancies. The Las Vegas Raiders agreed to a 3-year deal with a 4th-year team option with Pete Carroll, as reported by Adam Schefter. Carroll will be the Raiders' 5th coach, including interim coaches, since the franchise moved to Las Vegas in 2020. And in Jacksonville, a wild ride that ended up with Liam Cohen as their head coach. The Jags firing GM Trent Baalke, which piqued Cohen's interest again after he had accepted a contract extension in Tampa. Cohen then went to Jacksonville for the interview. Negotiations continued late into the evening Thursday. Sources telling ESPN that late Thursday night, he informed the Bucs that he was taking the Jaguars job. So now Liam Cohen turns his attention to Trevor Lawrence, who struggled in certain aspects of his game this season. His QBR ranked 27th or worse versus man coverage on 3rd down and outside the pocket. The Bucs offense especially excelled on 3rd down and outside the pocket, with their quarterbacks ranking 6th and 3rd in those respective categories. Different quarterbacks, right? But there's something there. RC, you like the partnership between Cohen and Lawrence in Jacksonville?
You know what? I like the partnership because of what Liam Cohen has shown and he can do. Listen, this is a guy that ain't scared to bounce around, right? Whether it's Los Angeles, back to Kentucky, into Tampa Bay, but he does understand the quarterback position. He understands how to put people in places where they can play well, be comfortable. And what I loved about what he did in Tampa was the emergence of the run game with Bucky Irving and also Rachaad White. I think that's how you have to balance out Trevor Lawrence. Whoever gets the job in Jacksonville always seems they're forcing Trevor Lawrence to try to take that next step instead of allowing him to progress slowly by using other parts of the team. You know you have an absolute stud and star in Brian Thomas Jr., but you want to start with the run game, allow Trevor to get comfortable and excel from there. And the one thing I did love, Baker Mayfield had some issues with turnovers in zone early on in the season, and you watched those decrease as he and the coach got a little bit more comfortable with one another.
Well, the thing he got Baker to do was throw the ball quickly. Lowest time to throw of his entire career. And when you go back to Trevor Lawrence's best year in the NFL back in 2022, he had the 3rd fastest time to throw in the NFL. So I think Cohen will lean into that. Ryan's spot on about the run game. What I loved about watching the Bucs this year was how the run game evolved. This used to be more of a zone running team. Over the course of the season, they adjusted to the strengths of their back, Bucky Irving, leaning more on those gap concepts. I think he could do something similar in Jacksonville and call a more quarterback-friendly offense as a result.
You know, Dan, we saw Trevor Lawrence this season maybe at one of his lower points, and you saw the lack of confidence that he had. What do you think Liam Cohen needs to do to rebuild that, and how can he do it quickly?
Get him to think he's good again. I mean, that's simply put, you have to get Trevor Lawrence to believe that he's a guy again. You know, Trevor Lawrence had that time when he started to play at a certain level. I loved what he did with Baker. He got Baker to play really aggressive. Now, that's a little bit of Baker's nature as well. It also helped that Tampa Bay's offensive line was really, really good. And so if you can get Jacksonville's offensive line to be that, now they got to hire a general manager. I would wonder if Mike Greenberg, who is the assistant general manager in Tampa Bay, comes over. By all reports, the process of how this went wasn't necessarily received well in Tampa Bay, so I don't know how that relationship is. That's an assumption, but you got to get Trevor to think he can play at a high level in this league again.
That's a really interesting comment. I agree. All right, RC, what do you think?
I mean, it's going to be very hard to get Greeny to stop doing Get Up and Sunday Countdown, but I'm sure maybe they can lure him. Maybe they can lure him away. Dan, I do want to ask you this, right? When you think about a Baker Mayfield and sort of rebuilding his confidence, this is a guy who's a fighter, was a former walk-on, had to transfer. Trevor Lawrence has never dealt with that. Right. He's been the golden boy since being younger. How difficult might it be to rebuild his confidence in himself?
It's going to be a way bigger challenge than it was for Baker Mayfield, but you know this league. The reality is you got another year or two, Trevor. It's certainly down in Jacksonville, and you are going to have to turn the corner to unequivocally prove that you're the guy. You are talented enough. You've had the moments, but we need to not play scared football, and we need to be on the aggression all the time.
One of my favorite things about Liam Cohen is how he personally takes ownership of what's happening with any offense that he's been in charge of.
He's
a lot of accountability. Exactly. I think that works well there, too. All right, let's get to another coaching story, developing story today. Adam Schefter reporting that Bobby Slowick is out as the Texans offensive coordinator, noting that he went from one of the hot names of last year's coaching cycle to now out of a job. Dan, does this move make sense to you?
Yeah, it was needed, and this is why a lot of head coaches in the league fail at times, because they're incapable of making difficult but necessary decisions. Kudos to DeMeco Ryans. I'm sure this was difficult, but this was necessary. One, the protection never got fixed. It was a season-long issue in Houston. Sometimes it was personnel-driven, absolutely. Sometimes it was scheme-driven. To consistently, on a week-to-week basis, have defensive lines and defensive coordinators teeing off on your quarterback, that's a problem. The second thing is this offense never really evolved this year. It never really grew this year. Teams had a beat on what they were doing more often than not, and that is contrast to what we've seen so many of the Shanahan tree people do, is that constant evolution. That did not happen in Houston.
Obviously, they didn't have Tank Dell. They didn't have Stephon Diggs. So there were some things that they dealt with, but certainly time for change.
Gerard Johnson, Clint Kubiak, two names that pop into my head.
Interesting. Johnson already on. With the Eagles all week on the lead up to Sunday's NFC Championship game, Sal, quarterback Jalen Hurts was listed as a full participant in yesterday's practice as he deals with that knee injury. You offered up your observations from practice then. What can you tell us about his health today?
Laura, he looked pretty good. He was moving well. I saw him running from the NovaCare facility to the bubble where practice was in the parking lot, and he didn't show any kind of limp. Now, here is the video of him practicing today inside the bubble. The Eagles were inside today, and he was moving like, you know, he had no problems with the knee. He said he is progressing. Clearly, he is progressing towards being near as 100% as he possibly could. The big thing is maneuverability with inside the pocket. He's taken way too many sacks. Let's check out this graphic that we had made for NFL Live to look at the number of sacks he has taken, 9 in the 2 postseason games. And when you compare it to Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Jaden Daniels, Mahomes has 3 sacks, Josh Allen 3, Jaden Daniels 1, combined 7 sacks for 27 yards lost. I asked him today about what they are doing to try to reduce the number of sacks against the Washington Commanders.
It takes all 11 for those things to happen. And so I think to answer your question, the number one thing is just communicating, being on the same page, understanding the MO of what we're trying to accomplish so we can execute in the fashion we want to.
The bottom line for executing for the quarterback is get rid of the football. Jalen Hurts' time from snap to release as second slowest in the National Football League this year, 3.12 seconds. And when you compare him to Jaden Daniels, second fastest in the National Football League, 2.7 seconds. He's got to get the ball out. It's hut, ball out. Don't put too much pressure on that offensive line because you know Dan Quinn and the Commanders are going to be coming. They've even talked about it. They're already talking about it down there in Washington. They're coming after Jalen Hurts in this football game. Football out, reduce the number of sacks.
That's well said. Tell him, Sal. Thanks so much for joining us here on NFL Live. RC, you heard the report there from Sal. How should Washington go about defending that Philly offense in your mind?
Well, I think the first piece is you're going to look at the second half of that game, and they're going to think penetration. You're going to see some of Frankie Louvu on the line of scrimmage, especially in 11 personnel when they go sub packages where you have Bobby Wagner in the middle of that field, so you can build sort of that over front. And I think the other piece about what Washington wants to do is you're going to have to win on the outside. Mike Sanistril, also Marshawn Lattimore, those guys are going to be on the island. And we've seen this from them defensively throughout the year. But this is the reason Marshawn Lattimore was bought there, to be that big physical defender when you're playing against someone like A.J. Brown. And we've also seen the young rookie from Michigan match up and make plays against some of the best wide receivers in this game. In the second half of that game with Kenny Pickett, these guys were finding ways to get open. That can't happen, and you can't allow Jalen Hurts some of those easy throws we saw from Kenny Pickett, especially if he's hampered in the run game.
If I was Philadelphia, I'd play this game on the sidewalks, meaning outside the numbers. I really would. I mean,
sidewalks.
Washington's defensive tackles are still high-end players. Allen and Payne are really good. The more you can get the ball out on the perimeter in your run game, the better. They don't tackle well out there. They don't set the edge well out there. You can throw perimeter screens out there. You got to get the ball to the numbers in your run game. You do that if you're Philadelphia, and you've got a chance to consistently have explosive runs. I would not allow Payne and Allen to be the focus point of this game. I want to make everybody else on their defense play dominant football against my unbelievable run game.
Yeah, my note for the Commanders was find a way for Payne and Allen to take over this football game, because when Jalen Hurts has struggled, it has been with interior pressure when he is either flushed outside of the pocket or unsure of what he's seeing. And to that end, if I'm Dan Quinn and this Commanders defense, you have to make him question what he is seeing on every passing down. We saw in the last game against the Rams when they put 5 men on the line of scrimmage and then hit him with simulated pressures. He held on to the football. Frankie Louvu has been fantastic this year. You have to make Jalen Hurts question whether or not he is coming as a rusher or dropping into coverage on every passing down. It's that uncertainty that will be your biggest asset.
All right. Let's pick the game. Sorry, I was mesmerized. Who are we taking here? We're going to throw the picks up, and you're going to see that there's only one of us on the Commanders, and that would be Ryan Clark.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it, man.
I almost picked him, too.
A man picking with his emotion.
Go ahead,
don't hate
RC.
it.
Why
I
are you
don't hate
picking
it.
him?
Why am I picking with my emotion? I'm not picking with my emotion.
LSU.
Yeah.
This is a team that, listen, I love Jalen too. This is a team that's hot. I don't know what Jalen will be in the run game, and I just feel like they can find a way to make enough plays, turn the football over, and I do believe that 5 is big enough for the moment.
I love it. We have the same score, by the way. I did. I was close to picking the Commanders. You picked the Eagles, Dan. Shocker.
I saved the graphic,
He's asking
guys.
about his score.
If Washington wins, I saved the graphic.
Selfless.
We're going to pick the AFC Championship next as well, and still to come as well. The Chiefs defense is going to have their hands full against Josh Allen and the...
Các bạn đã quay trở lại với kênh YouTube của mình. Video ngày hôm nay mình lại làm những video tô màu để gửi tặng tất cả các bạn đây. Đây là những đồ vật, con vật của mình chuẩn bị tô màu để gửi tặng tất cả các bạn. Đấy. Những sản phẩm của mình rất chi là nhiều, đây. Và không thể thiếu được hộp xăm màu của mình này các bạn ơi. Hộp xăm màu giúp mình tạo ra những sản phẩm tuyệt đẹp. Và bây giờ các bạn cùng theo dõi mình tô màu nha.
Bây giờ xin tiếp tục câu hỏi đó là